Back here in the U.S., former President Trump is trying to stop the White House from turning documents over to the House committee investigating the January 6th Capitol riot. In a lawsuit filed yesterday, he argued the materials serve no legislative purpose and should therefore be withheld from Congress. In the filing, Mr. Trump also referred to the committee's investigation as an illegal fishing expedition. Last week, President Biden rejected Trump's assertion of executive privilege. The White House said that it would give the panel access to federal records connected to the Trump administration and the insurrection. Lawmakers on the committee, meanwhile, are making moves to hold former White House official Steve Bannon in contempt. Documents released yesterday outline efforts the panel took to get him to comply with its subpoena and his failure to do so. The committee is holding a vote today, and they'll likely recommend criminal prosecution for the former Trump ally. So Nancy Cordes is joining us now from the White House with more on all of this. Nancy, how will that process play out? What does the White House make of former President Trump's lawsuit?
Well, no surprise here, Anne Marie, they do not approve of his lawsuit because, after all, it was just a couple of weeks ago that President Biden sent a letter to the National Archives arguing exactly the opposite of the claims that this lawsuit is making. He said that the public interest in understanding exactly what happened on January 6th outweighs any claim of executive privilege over these documents. And we just got a White House statement this morning from a top official who says former President Trump abused the office of the presidency and attempted to subvert a peaceful transfer of power. The former president's actions represented a unique and existential threat to our democracy that can't be swept under the rug. As President Biden determined, the constitutional protections of executive privilege should not be used to shield information that reflects a clear and apparent effort to subvert the Constitution itself. So this was a really full-throated criticism from this White House. Typically, they don't like to get into a tit-for-tat, a back and forth with the former president, but here they were more than happy to wade in. And of course, it's possible that if this becomes a court fight, that the White House will get pulled into that fight as well.
So, Nancy, let's talk about the news that Anne Marie mentioned at the top of the show. North Korea appearing to have fired a submarine-launched ballistic missile for the first time in 2 years. This follows a series of similar tests conducted by Kim Jong-un's regime. But there is something significant about this test specifically, and I'm wondering if there's been any reaction yet from the White House.
No comment from the White House yet. They've been pointing us to a statement that was put out by the U.S. military command responsible for the Indo-Pacific region. That was a very brief statement, just a few sentences, saying that they're aware of the launch, that they've been consulting with allies in the region, especially South Korea and Japan, of course. And this statement condemned the actions of the DPRK, calling on them to refrain from any further destabilizing acts. Interestingly, they said that they've assessed that this event didn't pose any immediate threat to U.S. personnel, U.S. territory, or the territory of allies, signaling that they don't think much either of the aim or the strength of this particular missile launch.
One more topic for you. It's like we're changing channels, but I know you can follow us. The Biden administration asked the Supreme Court to block the Texas law that bans most abortions in the state after 6 weeks of pregnancy. This is the one where, once a fetal heartbeat is detected, then an abortion is not permitted. But also there's we normally don't talk about it, but the other component of this law that is quite interesting is that it allows a private citizen to sue anyone involved in the procedure, whether it's a doctor or, somebody who gave counseling to a pregnant woman. And that's what makes it very different than a lot of other laws that seek to restrict access to abortion. The federal government has tried on a couple of occasions to limit its implementation. What is their argument moving forward with this, and how likely is it that the court's going to agree?
Their argument to the Supreme Court is that this new Texas law is unconstitutional and that every day it remains on the books, it is limiting the constitutional rights of women in Texas to seek an abortion if they want one. And so what DOJ is now doing is calling on the Supreme Court to issue a stay by Thursday at noon. This is an emergency request. And beyond that, they are asking the Supreme Court to hear oral arguments on this Texas law this term. They don't want the Supreme Court to wait for the normal appeals process to play out. They want the Supreme Court to take it up this year. And that, of course, could cut both ways. We don't know how the conservative majority on the court would rule. You're taking a risk that they could enshrine this Texas law as constitutional, and that would obviously be a huge threat to Roe versus Wade. So this Supreme Court and the conservative majority has once before declined to prevent this Texas law from going into effect, and we don't know yet whether they will rule any differently this time around.
Nancy, meanwhile, the president is meeting with House Democrats today. That's the latest effort by President Biden to revive stalled negotiations on his economic agenda. So where do we know where things stand right now with those negotiations?
Where things stand right now is that the president is bringing two separate groups of lawmakers into the White House today on what is clearly lawnmower day here on the North Lawn of the White House. He's going to be meeting with one group of House progressives and one group of House moderates. And this comes as he's been facing some criticism from lawmakers who feel that he isn't getting involved enough to try to bring the last few holdouts on board. And they've become more and more vocal about that. The White House argues that he has been very involved behind the scenes. He just met with the leader of the Progressive Caucus in the House, Pramila Jayapal, yesterday. They said that he's been meeting with the full spectrum of Hill Democrats over the past few days, talking to them on the phone. But White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki told us yesterday that he is feeling an urgency to move things forward and get things done. And of course, we're getting very, very close to this new self-imposed deadline of the end of the month when Democrats want to try to work this out. But no outward signs at this point that progress is being made. So we'll be watching these two meetings very closely today to see what's discussed.
All right, Nancy, thank you very much.
You're welcome.